Monte Carlo, 1926. A Greek man with a walrus mustache sits down at the baccarat table with a stack of chips that would buy a small apartment building in Paris. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't sweat. And by sunrise, he owns a piece of the casino itself. His name was Nicolas Zographos, and along with 3 other men, he ran the most successful gambling operation Europe has ever seen. They called themselves the Greek Syndicate, and for roughly 2 decades, they didn't just beat the house, they became the house. Here's the thing. Most people think casino history starts with Las Vegas, Bugsy Siegel, the flamingo, the neon strip in the desert. That story is real, but it's late. The real machinery of high-stakes gambling was built in Europe, on the French Riviera, in the 20s, and 4 Greeks with a mathematical obsession bankrolled almost all of it. Let me show you how. Start with the man at the center, Nicolas Zographos. Born in Greece, educated in Constantinople, trained as a mathematician at the university in Athens. He wasn't a hustler. He wasn't a mobster. He was a numbers guy who realized something the casinos of his era hadn't figured out yet. That in the game of baccarat, if you played long enough, with enough capital, and paid enough attention, the edge could be nudged in your favor. Not by cheating, by observation, by memory, by discipline. Zographos had one skill that separated him from every other gambler on the Riviera. He remembered cards. Not the way a card counter tracks a shoe in modern blackjack. Something stranger. He tracked the sequence of what had already come out, and in a game with a slim built-in edge, that memory was worth a fortune. He called his method, when he called it anything at all, the Greek's edge. Roughly a 1-point-something% advantage. Tiny. But over millions of francs in wagers, that tiny number turned into a mountain. Now, one man with a good memory doesn't build an empire. He needed capital, serious capital, because in baccarat played à tout va, meaning any bet accepted, no ceiling, a single bad night can wipe out a bankroll that took a decade to assemble. So Zographos partnered up. The other 3 names you should know: Eli Eliopoulou, Athanasios Vagliano, Zeret Kuyumjian. Wealthy Greeks with old money, shipping money, banking money. They put up the stake. Zographos put up the brain. And together, in 1922, they walked into the casino at Deauville on the French coast and made the owners an offer that had never been made before. The offer was this: we will sit at your top baccarat table. We will be the bank. Every night. And we will accept any wager any player brings. No limits. In exchange, you give us a cut of the room and you let us run the game. The casino owners looked at each other. They thought about it for about 10 seconds. Then they said yes. Because a baccarat table with no limit is a magnet for whales. And whales bring their friends. And their friends bring their wives. And everyone in the room orders champagne. The casino would win either way. But here's where it gets interesting. The syndicate didn't just win. They dismantled the aristocracy of Europe one hand at a time. The Aga Khan, Indian princes, American oil heirs, British lords who'd inherited manors older than the United States. They all sat down against Zographos, and they all got up lighter. Sometimes millions of francs lighter. In one famous session against an American named Jack Warner, yes, that Jack Warner, the movie mogul, Zographos won so much that Warner reportedly stood up, laughed, and said he'd just financed his own biopic. The math is worth pausing on. Baccarat, played straight, gives the banker roughly a 1% edge over the player. That's nothing. That's a rounding error. But when you're the bank every night, and you accept every bet, and you have millions in reserve to survive variance, that 1% grinds. It grinds like a mill. Over a season on the Riviera, over hundreds of thousands of hands, that edge turned into what people at the time estimated was tens of millions of francs in profit for the syndicate. In today's money, we're talking a fortune measured in the hundreds of millions. Zographos himself said years later that the group's greatest single-season profit was somewhere around 36 million francs, back when a franc actually bought something. And here's the detail almost nobody knows. The Greek Syndicate didn't just play at the casinos, they effectively bankrolled them. The great gambling houses of Deauville, Cannes, Nice, Monte Carlo, these places were beautiful, but they were also cash hungry. A single bad night against a real whale could crater a casino's monthly numbers. So the syndicate stepped in as a kind of shadow reserve. They took the risk off the house. If a Russian Grand Duke walked in and started pressing bets into the sky, the syndicate absorbed the action. The casino kept its cut and slept easy. The syndicate kept the edge and slept richer. You'd think the casinos would resent them. They didn't. They begged them to keep coming. Because without the syndicate at the table, most of these rooms couldn't afford to host the biggest players in Europe. The Greeks were the liquidity. They were the market maker. In modern terms, they ran the prop desk of Belle Epoque gambling. Now, quick aside, because this story, honestly, makes me itch to sit at a table myself, and I know some of you feel the same after hearing it. If you ever do play, here's what I do. I only sit down at places I've personally checked out, where the payouts don't stall and the licensing is real. Because the last thing you want is to win and then fight to see your money. Where exactly? I left that in the description below. Now back to the Greeks. Because there's a darker layer to this story that most tellings skip. The 1920s were also the era of Arnold Rothstein in America. Rothstein, the man who fixed the 1919 World Series, the man who built the template for organized gambling in the United States, the man Fitzgerald based Meyer Wolfsheim on in The Great Gatsby. Rothstein was murdered in 1928, shot over an unpaid poker debt in a Manhattan hotel room. His death cracked open the underground gambling world in America and set the stage for what would eventually become the Las Vegas casino industry. Rothstein's protégés, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello, they took his blueprint west. Meanwhile, the Greeks were doing the legal, elegant version of the same thing in Europe. Same era, same math, different suits. Rothstein wore Brooklyn tailoring and carried a pistol. Zographos wore a tuxedo and carried a pencil. But they were solving the same problem. How do you turn variance into a business? Here's the provocative question I want you to sit with. Were the Greeks gamblers? Or were they the first professional traders? Because what they did wasn't luck. It was risk management on an industrial scale. They had capital, they had a small mathematical edge, they had endurance, and they had the discipline to sit at the same table night after night for years. That's not gambling. That's a hedge fund with better cocktails. Drop your answer in the comments. Were they gamblers? Or were they finance guys in disguise? I've seen that argument go sideways in real time. The end of the syndicate is the part people forget. The 1929 crash didn't kill them. They were too well capitalized. What killed them was the 30s. The Great Depression thinned out the whales. The Riviera got quieter. The Russian aristocrats who used to lose fortunes in a weekend were suddenly driving taxis in Paris. Then the war came. The Germans occupied France. The casinos closed or turned into propaganda outposts. Vagliano died. Eliopulo faded. Kuyumjin retired. And Zographos, the mathematician who'd built the whole machine, died in 1953, quietly, in Paris. He left behind a fortune, a reputation, and almost no interviews. He famously refused to explain his method in detail. He said it wasn't a trick, it was work. And here's what most tellings get wrong about the legacy. The Greek Syndicate didn't just influence European gambling. They wrote the rulebook that every serious modern casino operation still uses. The idea that the house needs a mathematical edge, not a rigged game. The idea that whales need to be courted, comped, protected. The idea that a casino is really a bank that takes deposits in the form of losing bets. All of that comes from what Zographos and his three partners proved on the felt in Deauville 100 years ago. Fast forward to today. Greece itself, the country that gave the syndicate its name, now has a gambling industry that rivals its banking and telecom sectors in size. Think about that for a second. The homeland of the four men who bankrolled European casinos became, a century later, one of the most gambling-saturated economies in Europe. Rothstein's blueprint went west and built Las Vegas. The syndicate's blueprint stayed in Europe and became the modern licensed casino model. By the way, if you want the other half of this history, we have a full breakdown on the channel about how Rothstein's death in '28 cracked the gambling world open and handed the future to Lansky and Siegel. Worth watching after this one. It's the American mirror to the story I just told you. If this kind of deep-cut casino history is what you came here for, you know the drill. So here's the final question I'll leave you with. Zographos won more money than any single gambler of his era. He beat kings, moguls, princes, and never once cheated. But he also never once revealed his method in full. He took it to the grave. The question is, was that class, or was that fear? Was he protecting a legacy, or was he protecting a trick that wouldn't survive daylight? Fight it out in the comments. I'll be reading.